Have you ever wandered into a shop and thought, oh, I'm probably standing on top of 300 skeletons? That is what every single person in Haverfordwest is going to be thinking about until the end of time. So, oh, hello? Hello? Can you hear me now? Excellent. My name is Alexandra Powell. I was acting finds supervisor for Dyfed Archaeological Trust during the excavations in Haverfordwest. This was part of the preparation for the European Regional Development Funded Regeneration Programme, a mouthful, in the historic county town of Haverfordwest. The proposal for a new complex with outdoor space overlooking the river on the site of the former Ocky White's department store. Now, it's very nice. Dyfed Archaeological Trust were commissioned to run an evaluation of the site in 2021, and immediately exciting discoveries were made, along with a bit of human bone and some really nice medieval tile, but it just got better. So, Ocky White's, you can see it here, just poking out at the corner of this picture, celebrated over 100 years of trading, boasting they stocked everything that Woolworths didn't. Although Ocky White's closed in 2013, the family's legacy survives in the Ocky White's travel agents on Bridge Street, just behind the new development. So here you can see a map, an Ordnance Survey map, a modern map, with an overlay. You can see the red line bordering the site of the proposed new development. Ocky White, the estate agents, I believe, is there, hole in the wall there. I think it's number 11 there. Just as a reference, this is the Cleddau River, this is Bridge Street, and Greg's is up there. Most importantly, have to know where Greg's is. So this image here is looking west again, over the new bridge towards the old Ocky White store, the library, the new library up here. This is the old marketplace. And you can see the historic castle in the background. So this image here, a little sad, unfortunately. This is the front Bridge Street facing Ocky White's entrance, looking a bit run down now, but ready for its new life. So before any new development, the site must be screened for potential archaeology. Staff studied the historic environment record and consulted the historic maps. The town is old and the history is well documented. Tancred the Fleming is credited with construction of the first castle between 1108 and 1113 after the Anglo-Norman conquest of Wales. The original town of Castleton, with its marketplaces and church, eventually outgrew its hilltop origin and the town expanded rapidly. And by the late 13th century, Haverfordwest was one of the largest towns in Wales. The navigable Cleddau meant that the town was open to trade, people and ideas. The town was visited by Henry II, 12th century chronicler Geraldus Cambrensis. The castle was granted to William Marshal and gifted to Anne Boleyn. Welsh forces led by Llewellyn the Great attacked and burnt the town but never took the castle. An Augustinian priory was established outside the town approximately 1210. The ruins today boasting, according to Cadw, the only surviving ecclesiastic medieval garden or pleasure garden in Britain. The town was a catch. Not surprising then, it caught the attention of a new order, the Jedis, not the Jedi, the Dominicans. So this again is an overlay of the proposed development, and there has to be the Jedi. So the river here, Bridge Street here. So this is the historical map dated 1889. And you can see here the Cleddau Ironworks. But just here, marked with a cross, very, very faint, Convent of Blackfriars, site of... So founded by St. Dominic in 1216, the order of preachers or Blackfriars, known because of their black cassocks, were attracted to urban areas. Unlike other orders which devoted themselves to isolated worship, the Dominican mantra was to work amongst the people, offering spiritual and medical aid. The order arrived in England around 1221, and during the mid-13th century they had arrived in Wales. 5 Dominican houses were constructed across the country at Bangor, Rutherland, Brecon, Cardiff and Haverfordwest. Although we know little about the individuals within the Dominican order here at Haverfordwest, we do have financial documents. So here are a few of those accounts. We know that by 1246, the St. Saviour's, the Dominican Friary, is recorded in Haverfordwest. Henry III grants the community 10 marks for the fabric of its church. 10 years later, 15 marks is granted, taken from moneys of the cross, to transfer the church and the buildings to a more convenient place, Bridge Street. Eleanor of Castile, along with Henry III, is another one of the high status patrons of the order. Eleanor, Edward I's wife, grants 100 shillings to each of the 5 Dominican houses in Wales. 39 friars at this point are recorded in Haverfordwest. If you come down to 1525, Kingmaker Sir Resap Thomas, the man who allegedly delivered the fatal blow at the Battle of Bosworth that took out Richard III, he leaves £2 for new vestments to the Dominican friars in Brecon and Haverfordwest. Unfortunately, by 1538, as Henry VIII broke away from the Roman Catholic Church, the wealth of these monastic houses were taken by the Crown. The Friary of St. Saviour's in Haverfordwest was dissolved and the friars removed. They were each made to sign their name on a deed surrendering the house to the king. The final name, we've seen, has been smidged or smeared over. Perhaps at the last minute, this friar withdrew his consent. Although the order no longer held a presence in the town, a history of St. Mary's Church comments that the fewness of burials at St. Mary's in 1598, so long after the order has dissolved, the friary has dissolved in Haverfordwest, the few burials in St. Mary's could be explained by the fact that people still preferred to bury their dead in the graveyard attached to the Dominican house in Bridge Street. So a complex comprised of church, cloister, dormitories, libraries, stables, gardens, fish ponds, and an infirmary would have made up the friary at St. Saviour's in its height. All this enclosed by a precinct wall. To give you an idea, this image shows the layout of the mainly 14th century elaborate Dominican friary at Norwich. It is likely that the friary extended, if I go back, it's likely that the friary extended the length of the present-day Bridge Street from the new bridge down here in the south all the way up to the old bridge in the north. So it took them up over pretty much most of that street. So the friars have long gone, the building dissolved, the wealth stolen. But eventually, Solomon Mary Church established the Mary Church Iron Foundry on the site during the 1800s. The foundry is known to have produced mainly agricultural items for the surrounding area, as well as maritime implements for the dockyard at Pembroke Dock. Fine cast iron railings can still be found throughout the town that were also produced at the foundry. There is also a suggestion that Joseph Mary Church showcased wares from the Haverfordwest foundry at the Great Exhibition in 1859. On the 9th of September, 1853, the Pembrokeshire Herald and General reports, Joseph Mary Church and Sons have been awarded the highest commendations by judges for their improved corn drill, and their turnip cutter worked 1/6 less power than others. It's impressive. So here we have, if I go back to the next picture. So this is a picture taken from the old bridge in Haverfordwest around the 1950s. And here, you've got the old foundry buildings just there. They're showing frontings on the riverside on the left. Unfortunately, the foundry met an explosive end. On the 22nd of November 1902, a former owner of the foundry, Mr. William Evans, suffered injuries when the boiler exploded. An inquiry found the proper maintenance of the boiler had not been undertaken. Mr. Evans was found guilty of neglect, held accountable for endangering public safety, and was made to sell the foundry to pay a fine, as well as the court expenses. The Cardiff Times reports, as you can see, he reports the incidents as an explosion of a somewhat serious nature. That's not the explosion, okay? That's not what was left. Eventually, there's no more foundry. Ocky White develops his new business, and this picture here, looking west towards Bridge Street, the river behind us, was taken in November 2021, after the Ocky White's building had been demolished. By February 2022, Dyfed Archaeological Trust started excavations in Zone 2, here, in Zone 2, which is the former cafe area. Working in such a small area and sharing that area with the construction team meant that space was at a premium. So the plan was to take the spoil, the stuff we dug out of Zone 2, put it onto Zone 3, finish off in Zone 2, put the Zone 3 stuff back in Zone 2, put Zone 3 onto Zone 2, and then carry on like that. The plan was to work from river to road, Zone 2, Zone 3, Zone 1. Right, so this is one of the few times that I was allowed on site. Anyone passing the trench, this is myself and my colleague Gabby here, who's at the back. Anyone passing the trench would have heard cooing and gasping as every stone or scrap of iron we found, we were so excited we kept rushing over to our lead supervisor asking, have we found the foundry? Have we found the foundry? So this is an image of the start of the excavation, Zone 2. We removed approximately 60 tons of soil by hand, amazing, about by hand, you know, the machines helped as well. We went through a lot of buckets and we lost quite a few trowels. So here, so this is a view looking east at the remains of the foundry casting pits. You can see one of them here, these big rings here, and the difference in the colour of the soil. These huge casting pits filled with sand would have the negative of whatever you wanted to cast inside them. Then you'd pour the molten metal inside. They were incredibly heavy, but all had to be removed off-site. This beam here split perfectly. It's a clean cut there, an end complete with its chain. We think this is part of the instruments used for moving the heavy objects around when the foundry was in full process. We think that this might be some sort of balancing beam for distributing the weight more evenly, but nonetheless, it had to come out the pit. So, as we strip away the gritty black foundry waste and gradually make our way down to the medieval deposits, the evidence of the cemetery begins to show. This was my very first time excavating human remains. It's very strange. At one point, I found myself lying next to the skeleton, almost nose to nose, trying gently to pick out earth between its teeth and eye. It's a very strange thing. So it's my colleague Gabby here, myself at the back with my bucket. Excellent. And this is Anthony. Anthony, yes. We'd only found a few skeletons and we thought that we're only human, and these were once humans, so we tried to give them names. We don't want to just think of them as just, you know, artifacts in the ground. So eventually we found so many we didn't have enough names. So we started off, this is Anthony. So we're coming to the end of Zone 2, and the quantity of finds has grown so much that our little cabin on site was fit to burst. So we moved the post-excavation programme to 16 Bridge Street, formerly Conroy's Colour Centre. I think it's quite ironic that Conroy's Colour Centre is a black and white photo, which is quite funny. This image kindly shown to me by Dave Harris from the Civic Society Archives. Eventually, the building was used as a Welsh Spitfire museum. The ground floor was spacious, and it gave us an opportunity to engage with the public. And with the help of employees from John Weaver's, the contractors on site, the building was cleaned and display platforms were assembled in the windows. Slowly but surely, we filled one window with an eclectic arrangement of finds. Then we filled the other window. Then we filled the whole French section of the ground floor. Then we filled the entire room. By April, we had found our first 17 burials, bags and bags of disarticulated animal bone, 18th century glass bottles, casting boxes from the foundry, along with a crucible. Some of you might have seen my colleague Gabby showcasing that on the display. This crucible with cylindrical iron ingots to be cast, smelted and cast down. There was a stoneware ginger beer bottle from Llanelli, cod bottle marbles, a corroded tin cup and cutlery, medieval tiles, and an articulated dog skeleton, which we presumed was someone's beloved pet. We affectionately named him Merlin, and he was subsequently reburied on site. So my role as finds officer meant I was responsible for cataloguing, washing, and or storing the finds. Bone, ceramic materials, tiles, pottery, shell, and stone can carefully be washed. Metal? No. Mortar? No. But everything needed to be labelled and catalogued. But I am one woman. We needed to call reinforcements. The post-excavation was opened up to volunteers who flocked in their hundreds for the chance to help. In the first 4 hours of putting out the advert, we received close to 100 inquiries. We are indebted to our volunteers. Their enthusiasm for the work and eagerness to engage with the public meant that the finds were being processed faster. More and more people were coming to visit the museum and ask us about the excavation. We had several school visits, and by the third group, the regular volunteers confidently took over, showing people around the finds. Right. So we had our own secret garden. So this is out the back through 16 Bridge Street. This is our view. We would deposit our water that we'd be using for washing out the back here. So this is the view out the back door, a set of slate tread stairs, a ruined latrine, and then the castle. It was very, very special. So back to work. The soil clung to the artefacts, so hundreds of mushroom trays, donated by locals and volunteers and sourced by staff, were stacked, lined with newspaper, and each tray labelled with a context number that it was discovered in. Each articulated skeleton was given a unique number. Once the soil had dried, it was brittle and crumbly and started to separate from the bone, so we donned the gloves to start washing. Warm water, a soft toothbrush, a sponge, and a bamboo skewer made up our arsenal of tools, and gently each fragment of skull, every finger bone, long bone, and tooth was cleaned to identify any pathology or landmarks which would help the osteoarchaeologists identify sex, age, and any trauma. Every bone must be washed, with some exception. The soil conditions across the site varied. The estuary was once much wider and the soil heavy with water. The quality of the skeletons sitting in the wet soil was so poor we could have done more damage by cleaning them. Sometimes you just had to let them dry. There were many infant and baby skeletons, and those were just too delicate. Once the artifacts are dry, it's time to bag them. Every bag was labelled with an ERN, the event record number. This is a unique, remember this number, this is a unique number for the site, 125650, 125650, 125650. This number was carved into our very soul for the number of times we had to write it. The dried, bagged and labelled artefacts are now separated into materials. Animal bones, pottery, CBM, ceramic building material, such as decorated floor tiles and ridge tiles, carved stone, and disarticulated human remains. 309 skeletons were recovered during the excavation, and many, many more disarticulated bones. It is very easy to disconnect yourself from the work. Surrounded by hundreds of human bones seems surreal, but these were people. They were buried by loved ones. They lived, they laughed, they cried, and then they passed away. Some burials were grouped together, suggesting that they were probably from the same family. In these cases, we tried to keep the skeletons together during the post-excavation. So even though they had been separated and bagged, we kept them together in the room. This is a few of our fantastic volunteers. Notice how empty the room is in this picture. Even more so, look at that, there's nothing. Nothing at all. This was a few months later. It started to grow. By the end of it, you can just see me poking out the back there. By the end of it, you couldn't see the floor. So the trays in front of these volunteers are full of washed tile, animal and human bones, stone and pottery. And as I said, by the time that the field team had started to move into A3, the finds were so plentiful that, yeah, we lost the floor. So the post-excavation continued into the Christmas months, and we lost the use of 16 Bridge Street, and the team called upon its volunteers once again, and they fantastically answered the call and joined us at Dyfed Archaeological Headquarters, where they're sitting here happily scrubbing away at bone. Wonderful. So between September and November, the volunteers had collectively contributed 404 days to the project. About 47 volunteers at that time. We could have easily had about 60. So, oh, how long have I got? Have I almost done? Nearly done?
Yeah. Don't rush.
So this is a group found in Zone 3, but gives you an idea of how complex the area was. Burials on top of burials. Every grave is photographed, drawn, described, post excavation, a pro forma to mention texture of fill, orientation of grave, position of the skeleton, meant that we could record as much information as possible. The further you get in exposing the bones, the smaller and smaller the tools become. Trowels, leaf trowels, spoons and hand shovels become dental kits and paintbrushes. It's a very satisfying job. Although the skeletons were, generally, articulated, contained and undisturbed within their grave, we found random long bones placed in graves, skulls arranged as a halo around the head of another. There is now nothing holding these bones together, bones in place. The muscle, the tendons, the skin, long gone. So to assist the osteoarchaeologists, we decided to separate the elements of the body. The hands, the left and the right, where possible, were separated. The legs, left and right, the feet, left and right, where possible. Sometimes they were placed over one another. The vertebrae and the pelvis kept together. The ribs, left and right, and the scapula, the shoulder blades, were placed with the respective upper and upper limbs. The cranium and the jaws were kept together. We went through a lot of bags and trays. So this was a unique burial, an adult and child. A thin layer of earth between them suggests that the adult grave had been opened and the arm moved to embrace the child. We do not know if they are related to one another, but it feels so human to not want a child to be buried on their own. So maybe a stranger, someone to lead them on to the afterlife? Who knows? We'll come in further study. So we found the most impressive coffin nails, many perfectly outlining the skeleton, the wood rotten away, but the nails survive. Coffins are reserved for the wealthy and status, so most people were stripped and wrapped in a shroud, placed straight into the grave. The sheet or strip of linen wrapped tightly around the body, their arms fixed over their chest, hand over hand, wrist over wrist, some of their arms positioned over their torso, all orientated with their head to the west and their feet to the east. Burial records on the eastern side of this large wall, this is on the far end of the site by Bridge Street, found that the burials on the farther side, looking out towards the river, comprised mainly of adults and children, but the burials on this eastern side were all, the western side, were all adults. The burials were in coffins, and they appeared to have been stacked and showing no signs of intercutting. There were 11 adult skeletons buried in coffins found on this side of the wall. These here, one on top of the other. And you can see here, the grave cut is a bit more of a splodge. It isn't nice and straight that you'd find like with a coffin. Bit of a sort of right. So just to quickly go through some of the finds. So the linen wrap could be fastened in place with as little as one pin, and these pins would be made of bone, wood, or as we have here, copper alloy. These pins vary in length, between 3 to 4 centimetres. They vary in thickness and the condition that they survive. Some of them you can see retaining their point and that bulbous head. Some of them are pretty badly fractured. These pins are so tiny and are easily lost during excavation, so it was a real treat to find them. Any copper alloy artifacts, shroud pins, buckles, twisted wire loop are wrapped in acid-free paper and bagged. They're not exposed to water. they're already going to start, in some cases, decaying and damaging as they're exposed to the air. So we're going to try and stabilise the conditions as quickly as possible. So almost. So one of the most interesting crypts recorded during the course of the excavation was found in the northeast corner of what we think was a church. Within the hands of this individual was placed a pewter patent and chalice for serving the bread, the host, and the wine, the blood of Christ, indicating that this was perhaps the burial of a priest. Now, understandably, they went to a professional conservator. They didn't come to me. Pewter is very soft, and the weight of the earth, as you can see, technical word, had smushed the two pieces together. So the team, our fantastic volunteers and David Archaeological Trust, were also contacted by the Crick Institute, who asked if we could supply them with ossicles from 50 individuals for DNA analysis. We ended up giving them 120, including those samples from the casket burials west of the wall, where those coffins were all stacked up again, and the ossicles of the priest, which I've just shown you. So ossicles are tiny bones, the smallest in our body, and they sit within the middle ear. You have a set of 3 in each ear. You have the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, the mallet, the anvil, and the stirrup. As air vibrates the bones, they stimulate a membrane of hair, and that is interpreted by the brain as sound. The skulls, as you can see here, if they were intact, many were not, sit in a bed of sand. This stabilises the skull as we turn to wash and clean it, and carefully we pick away any lodged earth from the ear in search for those tiny, tiny little bones. But as the days grew short and the light faded, we started to use head torches to peer into the ears. I can't imagine what we must have looked like. The sand was sieved after each investigation, and any rogue pieces of bone, and the wet material again placed in a clean lined mushroom tray to dry. We were fortunate to have volunteers on our team, Trish and Helen, who had helped clean and sort the human remains at the cemetery at St. Patrick's Chapel. And although the burial conditions were very different, what we would have given for soft sand which could be brushed away, their experience was invaluable. This is Pamela. She was queen of the ossicles. Equipped with her torch and skewer, she found more ossicles than anyone else. So we noticed several skulls. Closing up, okay. We noticed several skulls with puncture holes, originally thought to be victims of medieval poleaxe or a halbart. There's no evidence of radial fractures associated with a powerful blow. The holes are regular and smooth, suggesting careful and deliberate hand. We think now that these might be evidence of trepanning, a slow and steady pressure drilling through the skull to alleviate pressure, or demons. We know that the Dominicans would tend to the sick, so perhaps this is evidence of that. I'm just going to quickly run through, because there's a couple of pieces I'd like to show you. If there's any slides that you'd like to know more at least let me know, and I'll go back over them. But I'd like to get to the tiles, just before we go. So this is one of the many floor tiles that we found in the backfill of the graves during the later part of the excavation. The style of the tile would suggest an early 13th century date, and is believed to be the heraldic symbol of the local Picton family. The family mentioned first as early as the 15th century, and probably a donor of the Friary. These beautiful tiles are also going to get the chance to style a modern home, thanks to the wonderfully created and enthusiastic Lindsay, a local lady who, inspired by the excavations at the Friary and the tiles, created these lovely coasters, which are so lovely. And they're on sale, I think, still, so you can go and buy them. So this is Gabby finding a fantastic Latin-scribed tile there in one of the medieval ditches, and a later foundry cistern. So interesting point about this tile. So here we have a tile on the left, and the tile, oops, sorry, that's the wrong slide. There we go. So the tile on the left here, tile on the right, identical. So the tile on the left was the one that Gabby was holding, found at St Saviour's, Haverfordwest. This one, though, was discovered at Evesham Abbey, and it was one of a set or round of 16. The soft clay was impressed with a pattern or script carved onto a wooden stamp, the cavity filled with a contrasting coloured slip, and the excess wiped or scraped away. you can make out on our Haverfordwest tile the R, A, T and the I. Completed, the pattern would have read Deo gratias, or thanks to God. St. Saviour's Dominican Friary is recorded to have been a popular pilgrimage destination. People would come far and wide to visit the image of the Virgin Mary with a miraculous taper. Unfortunately, we never found such a thing, but perhaps it's further down Bridge Street. Right, so these are some of the tiles just to show you comparisons between the tiles on the top from Haverfordwest, and these are illustrations of the tiles found at the Carmarthen Greyfriars. They're identical. So this one here, just very quickly, this tile here, this was found during an evaluation trench in October 2021, and we have, if we move it down, there we go. So we've affectionately named this tile the Superman tile, which is quite nice, and it's one of several alphabet tiles that were found. So we have one, and we have this, an X, maybe, pair of Speedos and some nice shaved legs, don't know. We think maybe we found, this way to the swimming pool, who knows? So it's quite cool. So you can see some of the tiles were doubled. These are all from Haverfordwest. This one again from Carmarthen Greyfriars. This one here, no idea. Some of you might have spoken to Gabby. This is a mystery tile. Heraldic devices, such as this, these are, the Welsh Herald has described them as cooped trees, so trees without roots. 3 of them on a shield field. We have absolutely no idea who this style is attributed to. It's been suggested that they were a patron of the Friary, maybe a merchant from the continent who had donated stuff to the Friary and wanted to show that he had done such, buy his way into heaven. So, are you finished? Are you good?
So,
Yeah, no worries. There's more, but come back if you want to learn any more. Oh yes, we found a chess piece and a gold ring. And thank you all so much, everyone. Cool. There we go now.